The Garden of Eden, a place many consider lost to history or myth, is actually described as a profound psychological state we enter and leave constantly. Frank Onisi, in his book The Eden Project, argues that this isn't a story about a literal apple or a talking snake, but an intricately encoded map of our own inner world.
That's right, William. Onisi's work, which is Book 2 of his esoteric Genesis series, interprets the Genesis narrative not as historical fact, but as an esoteric guide to manifestation and inner peace. The garden isn't a physical location, it's a state of consciousness. Adam and Eve are faculties of your own mind. The serpent is the persuasion of your physical senses, and even God represents your awakened consciousness.
So, if it's all an inner landscape, how does the story of Adam and Eve fit into that? You mentioned them as faculties of our own mind. Can you elaborate on that marriage in the garden?
Absolutely. Onisi reads Adam as the conscious, waking mind, the intellect that observes, names, reasons. Eve, conversely, is the subconscious mind, our feeling nature. She's called the mother of all living because every manifestation in our outer world is birthed from that subconscious feeling. When Adam and Eve, or your conscious intention and subconscious feeling, are in harmony, that's the peace of the garden.
And how does Eve come into being in this interpretation? Genesis says God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. What does that signify for our inner work?
That deep sleep is crucial. It represents the drowsy, quieted state at the threshold of sleep. Our conscious mind, Adam, is usually vigilant, analyzing, guarding against anything that contradicts visible facts. But when it's in a deep sleep, its critical guard is lowered. This allows our subconscious, Eve, to receive impressions, particularly the feeling of the wish fulfilled, unopposed. It's the gate of manifestation. The subconscious receives in stillness, not clamor.
This idea of Adam and Eve being naked and unashamed before the fall, then suddenly feeling exposed afterwards, it's a stark contrast. What does that nakedness represent in this inner context, if not literal clothing?
Before the fall, nakedness signifies transparency, a mind free of limiting beliefs, guilt, or any false persona. It's being entirely open, aligned, and at ease with oneself. The shame only arises after the fall, after judging by appearances. Onisi emphasizes that shame isn't native to us, it's an acquired affliction from the fall. Our native state is, quote, naked and unashamed, end quote, meaning a profound self-acceptance.
So the garden's peace is this unified mind, free of shame. But at the center of the garden are two trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. How do these translate to inner states, and why is eating from one so different from the other?
The tree of life is unity. It's the awareness that there's only one power in your universe, your own I am consciousness, and everything proceeds from it. To eat from it is to know you are the creator, safe, and that all things unfold perfectly from your consciousness. The tree of knowledge, conversely, is duality. It's a consciousness that sees two powers, good and evil, for and against. Eating from it means judging the outer world's appearances as good or bad, surrendering your inner state to external circumstances.
And the warning, quote, in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die, end quote, means a psychological death, a loss of inner peace, not a physical one.
Exactly. That death is the death of your peace, your assumption, the garden state. The moment you begin judging the outer evidence and letting it dictate your inner state, your Eden dies. We lose the kingdom not by physical death, but by abandoning that state of unified peace.
This implies that even things we perceive as good in the outer world can be part of this dualistic fruit that leads to a fall. That's counterintuitive. Isn't it good to feel elated by positive signs?
It's a subtle trap. If your peace depends on favorable signs, it's equally vulnerable to unfavorable ones. That elation from a longed-for text or positive news, while pleasant, still means you've made your inner state contingent on outer appearance. The unified mind remains steady regardless of signs, because its peace rests on the one power within, not on external evidence. The dualistic tree affects us regardless of whether the outer sign is good or bad.
And the serpent, that much maligned character, Onaisi says it's not a demon, but our own physical senses. Why is it depicted as a serpent, and what's its primary tactic in this psychological drama?
The serpent is more subtle than any beast of the field because it represents our senses, which crawl on its belly in the dirt. It sees only what's immediately in front of it, at ground level, the current 3D facts. It lacks higher perspective. Its tactic isn't a direct command, but a question. Quote, "Hath God really said?" End quote. It plants doubt against your inner assumed word by pointing to visible evidence. It makes judging by appearances seem like prudence or reason.
So when we question our inner knowing or our assumptions based on what we see or hear, that's the serpent's voice, and it targets Eve, our feeling nature, first.
Precisely. The senses bypass our intellect and go straight for our emotions, stirring fear or anxiety. The serpent knows that if it can corrupt our feeling nature, Eve, it can prevent the manifestation she would have birthed. It's a calculated move. Onaisi states that the facts the serpent presents are just a delayed shadow of your past thoughts, end quote, not truth about your future. Disarming the serpent means recognizing its reports as past residues, not present creative power.
The eating of the fruit is portrayed as a precise, repeatable sequence. It's not just a single act, but an anatomy of a mental spiral. How does this spiral unfold, and how can we interrupt it?
The spiral begins with Eve, our feeling nature, turning her attention to outer evidence, the look. Then she eats by reacting to that evidence with fear, letting the outer fact become an inner state. Next, she gives also unto her husband, meaning the panic floods the conscious intellect, overwhelming it. Finally, the whole mind crashes out of the garden. The key is to catch it early. The moment you notice your attention turning to judge a fact or a flicker of fear arises, you have a chance to intervene. You pause, you breathe, and you remind yourself that the 3D world is a delayed shadow. You don't let Eve hand that fear to Adam.
So if the fall isn't permanent and we can catch the spiral, what happens after the initial fall? The story immediately mentions Adam and Eve sowing fig leaves. What are these fig leaves?
Fig leaves are limiting beliefs and false personas. After falling and feeling exposed, we manufacture these coverings. I'm not good enough. I always fail at this, or putting on a brave face to hide our perceived inadequacy. This hiding from God is our withdrawal from our own creative power, abandoning inner work due to guilt. Onaisi highlights the paradox. We hide when we most need to return to our source. The blame spiral also starts here, where we attribute our fallen state to external factors, which further keeps us exiled.
And this leads to exile into labor, the sweat of the face. This sounds like what many experience today, the hustle culture. Is that what Onaisi means by cursed ground and sweating for bread?
Precisely. The exile isn't punishment, but a natural consequence. When you abandon the garden of assumption and trust, you find yourself in the wilderness of force, where nothing comes without effort. The cursed ground is the outer world experienced by a fallen mind as resistant. The sweat of the face is the exhausting hustle, trying to force results through sheer effort rather than letting the subconscious grow it. The exhaustion itself is the signal that you're in the wrong mode. You're trying to do by hand what was meant to grow by itself.
So if we're in this wilderness of forcing, what's the way back to the garden? The story ends with a flaming sword guarding the way. That sounds like a definitive lockout.
It's the most critical point. Onaisi argues the flaming sword isn't there to keep us out forever. It's there to keep our anxieties and dualistic thinking out of the garden. It's a fire of purification. To return, you must willingly walk through it, surrendering your reliance on evidence, your judgments, your shame, your forcing. It burns away the wilderness you carry. Only a purified consciousness passes through unharmed because there's nothing left for the flame to catch.
So the garden isn't lost, just guarded, and the sword is a filter, not a barrier to those willing to let go. That puts a completely different spin on the ending of the Genesis story.
It absolutely does. It implies that Eden has been within us all along. The return is not a journey to a distant place, but an inward turning, a shift in consciousness. The paradox is that the exile itself is a mercy. It prevents us from immortalizing our fallen state. If we ate from the tree of life in our duality, that fallen state would become permanent. The expulsion, therefore, preserves the possibility of return.
Frank Onice's The Eden Project offers a profound rereading of a foundational story, transforming it into a practical guide for navigating our inner world. Anyone seeking deeper insights into consciousness and manifestation should read this book. Share this episode with someone who is searching for a deeper understanding of their inner life.